Just a couple of days ago, the amazing people over at Unreal Engine and Warner Bros. Studios released one of the most influential technical demos I think of all time. I am of course talking about The Matrix Awakening. The Matrix Awakening was basically this technical demo that really pushed both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X to its limits to show off just what their new engine could do, particularly with that nanite technology. Now don't get me wrong, playing this game and viewing footage of it, I believe it is one of the most technically impressive demos of all time. However, I do think there are some points that are slightly misled here, and the general public have potentially got the wrong idea of exactly what this demo spells for the future of video games. So today we're going to be talking through some of the best points of this demo, as well as talking a little bit about why I believe this demo could be slightly misleading, especially for the general public. I've seen a lot of comments, particularly on IGN's YouTube video coverage of this, with people saying that they want to see full demos of this and they can't wait for games to look this good on a full scale. However, I think there are a few key problems with this, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, just who am I to be talking about this topic? Well, my name is Robert and this is Review Clue. But before I went ahead and did all of this YouTube stuff, I was at university studying games development. So I have a general idea of just what it takes to build these kinds of demos and fully fledged games. And I think I understand enough about the industry to know that this technical demo, though impressive, is also slightly misleading in certain senses. Anyway, let's get right on with today's video as we talk The Matrix Awakening. Now, I did play this demo on the PS5 and it was split up into two key sections. The first being a very story-driven based game in a sense, the other being a much more fun open world exploration. I'm going to start off by talking about that little story part of the game, because I think that's where it's certainly the most graphically impressive, but it has the biggest problem. We start off with this lovely cutscene with the amazing Keanu Reeves doing a talk about how The Matrix is and how it has developed over the years and just what the Unreal Engine and nanite can do. This is actually where the demo looked, I think, the most technically impressive. It was just a blank white room with an incredibly detailed Keanu Reeves model talking to us exactly about the engine. Now, I think this falls into the uncanny valley. It almost looks real, but there are just certain parts that didn't look quite right. For example, the hair didn't move or flow as he was walking around. And it, to me, picking it apart just didn't feel quite right. However, my partner sitting behind me said this looks almost photorealistic. And she was right, it did. I'm just a really picky person and pick out these tiny little details. After we've had this little talk from Keanu, we are dropped into the world of The Matrix. You are dropped into a car and you are being driven around the city. You start to be chased by different people in different kinds of cars, from police cars to general vehicles. And it is your job to shoot them. This is where the game looks the most graphically impressive, particularly with the explosions and the fire effects. However, this is what we called in the industry a vertical slice. It was a piece of a game in a very controlled environment. You may notice that actually the gameplay was incredibly minimal here. You could use the right stick to move between different targets and use the trigger to fire. That was simply it. There was no real free looking in that scene, and there wasn't a ton of interactivity outside of just pulling that trigger or moving on to a new target. You can think of this as something similar to Until Dawn. However, it did look the most graphically impressive I've ever seen. This is falling into the almost Beowulf style of videography, I suppose. We did see this film grain camera effect, and I think this did a lot to make this demo slightly more realistic. If we didn't have that, it would be falling more into the uncanny valley and I'd start to see more problems with it. This film grain just helped to really distill this sense of watching a film to me. Once all of this shooting and explosions is up, you are dropped into a beautiful open world. Now you're in this open world, what can you actually do? That's the thing, there's not a lot. You can walk around as this female protagonist, you can get into cars and you can drive around the city, and you can fly a drone and take some pictures. That's very much it. This is once again a vertical slice, a very, very controlled environment. There isn't a ton of interactivity or things to do here. You can drive around, you can't hit any pedestrians, you just fly straight through them. However, the damage to vehicles does look very impressive. As we open up that settings menu, there are a few really impressive bits in here, particularly with the camera controls. We have complete control over this camera from the ISO and aperture like we do on real cameras. As I get closer, we're seeing that focus and that aperture changing. This is exactly what happens as well in the demo, and it is one of the most impressive photo modes I've ever seen. Before we get too excited with this Matrix demo though, I do have to just remind you of the Watch Dogs scenario, and this is exactly where I think this demo falls as well. If you'll remember the E3 demo for Watch Dogs, it looked graphically impressive. The way that the puddles of water would reflect the light and the rain, and it just looked drop dead gorgeous. Everyone was so excited for how good this game was going to look. Then it came out and it really did not look that good. The main reason for that is because the stuff that happened in that E3 demo was all pre-prepared and a very, very small section of the game. There was very little actually there to do. We as consumers never got a chance to play that E3 demo. It was probably running on an incredibly high-end PC and had this very, very small section of the game running, so they could really optimize it and tune it to look the best that it could. When we eventually got the game, it was on some hardware that was probably less than ideal for the demo purposes, and also had to have this big open world, so the graphics were very much cut back from what they were in that E3 demo. And it's the same here. What we're playing through with The Matrix Awakening is this E3 demo of Watch Dogs. The full game would have to cut back quite considerably on that graphics front if it ever wanted to cope and be playable on the Series X and on the PS5. If we didn't, it would very much look something like Cyberpunk does now, with its incredibly slow frame rates on the current or the last gen consoles. See the Xbox One and the PS4. But of course guys, if this is the first time that you're seeing my face on your screen, then one, lucky you. And two, go down there, hit that subscribe button, smash that bell notification icon so you get notified every time I upload. We can see though that this is really pushing both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X to its absolute limits, especially while driving around the city. I was seeing my frame rates drop to an unplayable rate, particularly as we've got those pedestrians, cars and parked cars at that 100% level. This frame rate drop really just does show to me that maybe this is just a demo. We will never see a fully fledged game looking this good, especially not on this generation of console, because simply there's not enough there. Because simply there's not enough raw power there. There are a few key points to take away from this. As we zoom in on some cars, we can see some ray tracing going on, and it is the best looking ray tracing I've seen ever, especially coming from the Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 5. This was good ray tracing, however, the Matrix just did it that bit better. It is worth noting that you can turn off the Matrix green filter, and the game looks significantly better when you do. The Matrix green filter, though, does play into the whole scene and setting of the films. Turning that off just makes the game look that much more realistic. We can also play with the sun, and we can see changing that sun's angle, how it also changes reflections and the lighting in the scene. Moving forwards, particularly with the Unreal Engine 5, I simply cannot see games being able to take on this level of detail while still being interactive and enjoyable for a user. This demo is amazing and is fun to play for about 20 minutes before you realise just how little there is to actually do. Of course, you can play through that first scene as many times as you want, and you can really get lost in this city looking for collectibles, finding the best photo angles and getting those photos. I just wish that there was a little bit more here. And I think Unreal Engine knows that as well, and knows that they really are pushing this to its limits. Anyway guys, have you had a chance to play the Matrix Awakening demo? If you haven't, go download it now. It is free on the PlayStation Store and the Xbox Store. Go download it, go play it, try it out. It is one of the most technically impressive demos. Let me know in the comment section what you think, and of course, get subscribed while you're down there as well. My name's been Robert, this has been Review Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.